Númenor. It was the greatest kingdom of men that ever existed, a land risen from the sea and blessed by the Valar. But pride began to fill the hearts of its people, and their love for the West slowly turned into envy. Then came Sauron, with words sweet as honey and lies sharp as iron. He fed their longing, promising power, glory, even immortality. And in their pride they listened. Thus began the fall of Númenor, sudden, mighty, and without return. Yet Númenor had not always walked a path toward darkness. Long before pride and envy took root, it was a land of light, a gift unlike any other ever gifted to men. After the War of Wrath, when Morgoth was cast into the void, the Valar showed mercy to the Edain, the faithful warriors who had stood beside the elves against the shadow. From the depths of the great sea they raised a new land, fair and green, shaped like a star upon the waters. A land free of sickness, free of shadow, where life stretched long and hope shone bright. And so, Númenor came into being, and under their first king, Elros Tar-Miniatur, the kingdom flourished beyond all others, a realm of wisdom, strength, and unbroken friendship with the elves of the West. As the years turned to centuries, Númenor rose ever higher. Its ships mastered the seas, its halls shone with white stone and silver light, and its kings ruled with wisdom and strength. For 1,000 years it stood as a beacon among men, its people blessed with wisdom, and its name honored in every land. Favored by the Valar, the Númenorians were granted long life, great knowledge, and a strength unmatched by other mortals. Their sails reached farther than any before them, and their banners shone across every sea. Yet even in their glory, one law stood above all others. They were forbidden to sail westward beyond the sight of their own shores, for beyond that invisible line lay the undying lands, a realm kept only for the elves and forever denied to mortal men. At first, they accepted this command with reverence, for as Númenor rose in power and splendor, a quiet restlessness began to stir in the hearts of its people. The gifts they had been given, long life, wisdom, and strength, were no longer enough. They looked upon the elves, who walked the world without aging, whose spirits did not fade with time, and what had once been admiration slowly hardened into longing, and then into envy. They envied the immortality of the Eldar. They envied the shores of the West, where no mortal could set foot, and they began to question the very laws the Valar had set for them. Why must men die? Why were they forbidden to sail beyond sight of their own island? Why should the elves enjoy a fate denied to the greatest of men? These questions, first whispered in quiet hearts, soon grew into open doubt, and Númenor, once united, began to divide. Those who held to the old ways, who still honored the Valar, cherished friendship with the elves, and accepted the gift of men with humility, were called the faithful. They remembered the dawn of their kingdom, the mercy of the Valar, and the wisdom of Elros Tar-Miniatur. To them, mortality was not a curse, but part of the order Eru himself had set forth. But many others turned their hearts eastward. They grew proud of their strength, jealous of the elves, and resentful of the ban of the Valar, believing it robbed them of a destiny they deserved. These became known as the Kingsmen, ambitious, restless, and hungry for greater power. Their voices grew louder with each generation, challenging the old wisdom and scorning those who clung to it. And so Númenor began to divide, not yet openly, not yet violently, but in spirit and in purpose. A shadow was forming over the land, waiting only for the one who would give it strength. And in the days that followed, a new king rose to the throne, one whose pride matched the growing shadow. His name was Ar-Pharazôn, called the Golden, for no king before him shone with such power, such wealth, such unshaken confidence in the strength of men. Under his rule, Númenor's armies grew vast, its fleets stretched across every sea, and its glory reached heights unseen since the days of Elros. But with that glory came a hunger without restraint. Ar-Pharazôn feared no foe. He believed that no power in Middle-earth could challenge the might of Númenor. And when word reached him that Sauron, a dark lord in the east, was rising to strength, the king's pride ignited like fire. Ar-Pharazôn would not allow another to rule where he believed Númenor should stand supreme. So he gathered the greatest fleet ever built by mortal hands. A fleet so wide it darkened the shores upon its landing, and he sailed eastward across the sea. He did not sail in fear, but to prove Númenor's might. And when his fleet landed in Middle-earth, Sauron's forces met Númenor's armies. But as his stronghold was surrounded and his forces began to falter, Sauron beheld the strength of Númenor, and he bowed. Not even he dared to oppose such power. On the surface, he gave in, but in his heart, he smiled. For this was the moment he had waited for, and so Sauron, the deceiver, was taken to Númenor as a prisoner. After Sauron was brought to Númenor, his presence began to grow like a shadow over the land. Though his appearance was that of a captive, his words carried weight, and his influence began to seep into the hearts of the Númenorian rulers. He spoke of power, of kingdoms unchallenged, of strength that could rival the very Valar. He whispered of immortality, of life without end, promising it to the Númenorians who had long been jealous of the elves' eternal existence. But it was to Ar-Pharazôn, the king himself, that Sauron directed his words most carefully. "Why do you honor the Valar?" he asked. "Why do you bow to those who have kept immortality from your people?" Sauron's voice was smooth, and with each word he planted doubt in the heart of the mighty king. "They gave you gifts, yes, but they denied you the one thing that would make you truly great: immortality, eternal rule, dominion over the world." And in that moment, a seed of longing began to grow within Ar-Pharazôn's heart. The king, once proud and confident in the gifts of the Valar, began to question the very laws that had governed Númenor for centuries. The thought of immortality, of dominion over the West, stirred a deep longing within him. He saw before him the power to claim what had been denied, a power that could not be ignored. "You are destined for greatness," Sauron whispered, "greater than even the Valar would allow. Why should you accept their limits when you could have everything?" And so Ar-Pharazôn's mind began to change. The Valar, who had once seemed benevolent and wise, now appeared to him as prison keepers. The very gift of mortality, once accepted, now seemed like a curse. As the days passed, the king's resolve weakened. Sauron's counsel became more persuasive, and the thought of taking what was rightfully Númenor's grew irresistible. Sauron's influence grew ever stronger as the days passed. Though he had been brought to Númenor as a prisoner, his words soon carried more weight than any sword. The Númenorian court, once dismissive of him, began to see the value in his counsel. It was not long before Ar-Pharazôn, the king himself, called for Sauron to be freed from his chains and raised to a position of authority. Now, no longer a captive, Sauron became the king's closest advisor. His smooth words and subtle manipulations led the king further down a path of pride and defiance. "Why remain shackled to the laws of the Valar?" Sauron asked one evening in the king's private chambers. "You are the ruler of Númenor. You have the strength, the wisdom, and the might to rule as no king ever has before. Why bow to those who keep you from your true destiny?" Ar-Pharazôn listened, his mind opening to Sauron's promises. At first it was but a whisper of an idea, but soon it became a fire in the king's heart. "Take the west, Ar-Pharazôn," Sauron continued. "Claim what is rightfully yours. The undying lands await you, and the elves and Valar will never stop you, if you have the strength to claim your birthright." Sauron, once a mere prisoner, had become the king's most trusted advisor. His influence spread throughout the court, and with each passing day, Númenor's destiny shifted. The Valar's gifts, once honored as a blessing, now seemed like chains. As Ar-Pharazôn's heart hardened against the will of the Valar, his ambitions grew ever more consuming. No longer satisfied with his kingdom's might, he sought to claim the undying lands, to take what was never meant for mortal hands. In his mind, the undying lands were no longer a forbidden paradise, but a realm of power, waiting for him to claim it. Sauron, now his trusted advisor, whispered constantly in his ear, stoking the flames of pride and hunger for immortality. The Númenorian court, once full of the wisdom of the Valar, now bent to Sauron's will. The whispers of defiance grew louder, and the faithful, those who still honored the gift of men, found their voices drowned by the tide of ambition. But Ar-Pharazôn was not content with whispers. He knew that to secure his destiny, he would need more than mere words. He would need an army. Thus, with a king's ambition and a warlord's fury, Ar-Pharazôn mustered the greatest fleet ever to sail from Númenor. An army so vast, its sails blocked the sun as it set out for the west, to claim what had been denied to mortal men. But Sauron, the deceiver, had played his hand with great cunning. As the fleet approached the shores of Aman, the Valar gathered their strength to defend their realm. They had watched in silence as Númenor's heart had turned from light to shadow. But now the time had come for Eru Ilúvatar's will to be done. As Ar-Pharazôn's fleet sailed toward the undying lands, the very earth trembled beneath its weight. The Valar, guardians of the world, could no longer stand aside. They had allowed Númenor its rise, but now they saw that the pride of men had grown too great. From the depths of the seas, they called upon the power of Eru Ilúvatar, the one who had shaped the world and set its course. In that moment, the world itself answered, and the seas rose in fury. The skies darkened, and great storms swallowed the fleet, the waters of the great sea rising higher than any ship could sail. Mountains shuddered, and the very earth split apart as the power of the Valar and Eru's will was unleashed. Númenor, once a shining jewel upon the waters, was consumed by the sea. The island sank beneath the waves, its great cities and gleaming halls swallowed whole by the ocean's rage. The Númenorian people, kings, queens, and commoners alike, were lost to the depths, their kingdom undone by the pride and ambition of their king. The fleets of Númenor, so mighty and full of promise, were scattered and shattered, their sails lost to the storm. Ar-Pharazôn, once proud and unshaken, was swallowed by the sea with his people. His hunger for immortality had been his undoing, and now his reign was ended forever. Thus did the fall of Númenor come to pass, not by the hand of Sauron, but by the will of Eru Ilúvatar, whose judgment was swift and unyielding. The waves took Númenor. The island was no more, lost to the sea, never to rise again. Only the survivors, led by Elendil and his sons, escaped the fury of the flood. They sailed westward, driven by the will of Eru to Middle-earth, where they would begin anew. From the ashes of Númenor's fall rose Gondor and Arnor, two great kingdoms in Middle-earth, founded by the survivors of Númenor's light and wisdom. Though they would never reclaim the glory of the undying lands, the blood of Númenor lived on in their people, in the strength, the wisdom, and the longing for what had been lost. But even as they built, they carried the shadow of Númenor's fall with them, a warning, a reminder that even the greatest of men can be undone by pride. And so Númenor's story ended, a kingdom that had risen from the sea and returned to it in a single, overwhelming wave. It was a kingdom built on the hope and promise of men, but in the end, it was destroyed by their desire to grasp what was never meant for them. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, feel free to like the video and subscribe for more. This has been Lore Haven, a place where legends are kept and tales are given voice. There are many more stories waiting to be told. Until next time.